I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it, and I read it to her in there, and I did sort of feel a sort of
innocence about her. You just thought, wow.
Princess Diana's death shook the world, but the story of her brother's pain runs far deeper than most people realize. On September 6, 1997, Prince William and Prince Harry were ordered to walk behind their mother's coffin, but one man never wanted them to take that path. Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, opposed it from the very beginning. Why was Spencer so furious about the funeral arrangements? And why is he only speaking out fully now, after all these years? Today, we uncovered the hidden battles and heartbreak behind Diana's burial. The world will never forget. September 6, 1997. The day Princess Diana was laid to rest became one of the most watched events in history. Her funeral was broadcast across continents. Millions lined the streets of London, while billions more sat glued to their televisions. It was a day unlike any other one, filled with raw sorrow and overwhelming grief. Faces were streaked with tears, flowers were clutched tightly in trembling hands, and silence hung heavy in the air. London became a city of mourning, drowning in a sea of flowers and heartbreak. But at the very heart of this global tragedy stood two boys carrying a burden beyond imagination. Prince William, just 15, and Prince Harry, only 12, walked behind their mother's coffin, every step captured by relentless cameras. To the world, they looked calm, brave, and composed. Yet beneath that surface lay a weight no child should ever have to carry. What the world didn't see was the devastating emotional toll pressing down on them with every step from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey. Their childhoods shifted forever in that moment. For Harry especially, it became a haunting memory, one that scarred him for decades, and Charles Spencer knew this was wrong from the start. He grew up with Diana, knew her laughter, her pain, and the private side she kept hidden behind her smile. From the very moment he was told William and Harry would walk behind the coffin, he fought against it. To him, it was unthinkable to grieving children paraded before the entire world, their every expression dissected by strangers and their tears stolen by cameras. Spencer argued fiercely, grief should be private, not performed. Children should never bear such a cruel and unnatural burden. But the palace was unyielding. They insisted the boys had chosen it themselves. That claim broke Spencer's resistance. If it was truly William and Harry's choice, he would not interfere. But the truth was darker. William and Harry had no choice at all. 12-year-old Harry had no power to refuse. They were ordered to walk, believing he was respecting their wishes. Spencer stepped aside only to realize later that he had been deceived. His relief turned into anguish when the truth emerged. What he had fought so hard to prevent was forced upon the boys, and he was powerless to stop it. And that wasn't the worst of it. As the procession moved forward, Spencer walked beside his nephews. Cameras zoomed in on their pale faces, their eyes cast down, their steps steady but heavy with grief. The world applauded their dignity, but Spencer saw something else suffering. What looked like composure was, in reality, a forced performance. For Harry, it became a memory burned deep into his soul. He later admitted it felt unreal, like it was happening to someone else. William carried himself with quiet strength, but both brothers were carrying far too much. For Spencer, the tragedy of losing his sister was compounded by the injustice of watching her children endure a spectacle they never chose. He had lost the fight to protect them, and the helplessness tore at him. The world witnessed dignity. Behind the cameras was raw, unshielded pain. That day taught Spencer a brutal truth in the royal system. Even children's well-being could be overridden by duty and image. Diana's funeral was a public event, but for those who loved her, it was private agony. And for Charles Spencer, it became a moment of deep injustice, one that still echoes today. And yet, this was only the beginning. What followed would shape William and Harry in ways the world never fully understood. Stay with us, because this story is just getting started. Charles Spencer's eulogy inside Westminster Abbey remains one of the most powerful moments in modern royal history. His words carried the depth of a brother's understanding and the fury of someone who had seen injustice firsthand. Diana, in stark, unforgettable terms, the most hunted person of the modern age. a woman relentlessly pursued by the very forces that should have protected her. The cameras, the press, and the crushing weight of royal duty had surrounded her. Life in an endless storm, Spencer painted the picture with precision. No exaggeration, no embellishment. He made it clear, Diana's suffering was not random. It was the direct result of institutions and systems that failed her again and again. The eulogy was not just a tribute, it was a confrontation. Spencer refused to let the world forget who had contributed to Diana's pain. He called out the media, and he called out the institutions that stood by while she was left exposed, vulnerable, and unprotected. Each word cut through the ceremonial calm of the Abbey like a blade. This was no polite speech. It was a challenge, a demand for accountability in front of millions watching across the globe. And then came a promise. Spencer vowed that Diana's family would step forward to protect William and Harry. He declared that her blood relatives would shield her children from the same neglect, the same pressure, the same indifference she had endured. His words were firm, his voice unshakable, a public vow to stand between the boys and the merciless demands of the royal world. It was more than reassurance. It was a direct challenge to those in authority. A reminder that Diana's legacy lived on, and that her children would not be left defenseless. The atmosphere inside the Abbey was electric. Members of the royal family kept their faces frozen in polite neutrality, but the audience could not stay silent. In a rare, extraordinary moment, applause broke out in the middle of a funeral service. A wave of support surged through the Abbey, echoing Spencer's courage and shared recognition of the injustice Diana had suffered. Yet later, Spencer would admit he had limits. He could not pull William and Harry away from the system they were born into. His vow was heartfelt, but symbolic. The monarchy's grip was too strong, its structures too unyielding. Still, the pledge mattered. It reminded the boys and the world that someone outside the palace understood their pain and would stand beside them. Spencer's eulogy went further, piercing through the image of Diana as simply a royal figure. He made it clear she had never been fully accepted by the monarchy she married into. Her warmth, empathy, and charisma belonged to her alone, not to the crown. Within the palace walls, she was often isolated, silenced, and left to struggle. Then Spencer's words struck even deeper. He reminded the world that Diana had reached out for help again and again, that her calls were ignored, that the monarchy's silence in the face of her despair was part of the tragedy itself. By voicing these truths in such a public and sacred space, Spencer forced the world to confront what had been hidden. He refused to let Diana's humanity be erased by the institution's indifference. The impact was immediate. The eulogy reframed Diana's story, not just as a tale of glamour and tragedy, but as an indictment of the forces that failed her. It became a ripple effect, sparking conversations about accountability, transparency, and the welfare of the royals' most vulnerable members. For William and Harry, the message was clear. The world was watching, and they were not alone. For the monarchy, the warning was sharper. The people were no longer blind. Spencer's words cut through centuries of royal formality. They carried grief, outrage, and an unshakable promise. That day, the Abbey echoed with truth. The funeral ended, but Spencer's voice lingered, carried out of the cathedral and into the hearts of millions. It was not just a eulogy, it was a turning point. But Spencer's fight with the royal family didn't begin at the funeral. It began the very moment his sister died. So how exactly did the British royals provoke him? Let's go back to where it all started. The crash in Paris in August 31st, 1997. Diana's black Mercedes sped through a Paris tunnel, hounded by paparazzi, desperate for one last photo. Then came the crash. A violent impact crushed the car like paper. Diana survived the initial collision but was critically injured. Within hours, whispers turned to headlines. Finally, the confirmation arrived. Diana, Princess of Wales, was dead. The world was stunned. But miles away in South Africa, her brother Charles Spencer was still asleep. The first call woke him. The voice on the other end was calm but heavy. Diana had been in an accident, badly hurt. His heart pounded as he processed the words. He knew instantly what had likely caused it, the relentless chase of photographers. Then came the second call. This time the voice was colder, stripped of comfort. Diana was gone. Spencer's grief turned immediately to fury. He knew who bore responsibility: the paparazzi. The same vultures who had stalked her for years had chased her into that tunnel and into her death. Public grief versus royal silence. Outside Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, waves of grief erupted. Crowds gathered with flowers, handwritten notes, photographs. Men, women, and children sobbed openly, their faces streaked with tears. Streets became rivers of bouquets. Television screens filled with images of mourning, disbelief, and heartbreak. The reaction was universal. The world had stopped, but inside the royal family, silence. No statement, no flag lowered. No acknowledgement of the woman millions called the people's princess. Hours stretched into days. The monarchy seemed frozen. Why was the family silent while the world cried? Even the press, normally respectful toward the crown, turned critical. Headlines demanded answers. The public felt abandoned. Diana, the woman they adored, had been ripped from them, and yet the institution she once belonged to seemed unwilling to even grieve. William and Harry at Balmoral. Meanwhile, William and Harry were at Balmoral Castle, shielded from public eyes, but not from the truth. Their father, Prince Charles, had to sit them down and deliver the words no child should ever hear. "Your mother has died." For 12-year-old Harry, the words felt unreal. He asked the same question over and over, as if repetition might change the answer. But is she really gone? She's coming back, isn't she? The last time they had spoken to her was the day before, just a quick, casual call. Now, that brief moment weighed unbearably heavy. The boys weren't given time to process their grief. Inside Balmoral, the atmosphere was cold, rigid, controlled. Family members surrounded them, but the emotional support they desperately needed was absent. Outside, the world was weeping. Inside, silence reigned. Harry would later admit he felt utterly isolated, trapped in private grief while watching the public mourning on television. The disconnect was confusing, painful, and unforgettable. The Queen's delayed response, the pressure on the monarchy, grew unbearable. The people demanded to see grief mirrored back at them. They wanted acknowledgement of the woman who had given them so much love. Finally, on September 5th, 5 long days after Diana's death, the Queen addressed the nation. Standing before cameras, she paid tribute to her daughter-in-law. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh. Above all, she was a devoted mother to William and Harry. The words were sincere, but to many, they came too late. The silence had already created resentment. The monarchy appeared cold, detached, and out of touch with the grief of the nation. For Charles Spencer, the delay confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just protocol, it was indifference. The very institution that should have been a source of comfort had failed Diana in life and was now failing her children in death. He watched as William and Harry absorbed that coldness. Left to grieve in isolation, the damage was done. The boys' understanding of Lausanne, of the royal family itself, would never be the same, and Spencer's anger only deepened. The days following Diana's death exposed the deep cracks between the public and the monarchy, and the toll it would take on her sons. For Harry, just 12 years old, the loss was incomprehensible. A child trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly collapsed. Explanations from adults were filtered through royal protocols, filterizing composure over comfort, appearances over honesty. William, though older, carried his grief in silence. Together, the boys were left to shoulder emotions that no child should have to bear. And Charles Spencer watched in frustration. He saw how grief inside the palace was not shaped by love and support, but by rigid tradition. Outside, the world wept. Crowds filled the streets, laying mountains of flowers and tributes at royal gates. The public demanded compassion, acknowledgement, and a visible response from the monarchy. Instead, silence stretched on. Newspapers condemned the palace for its coldness. The Queen's delayed address only deepened the rift, Spencer recognized. How deeply damaging this was, not only for the monarchy's image, but for William and Harry themselves. The delay left the boys isolated and confused at the very moment. They needed guidance. Harry especially would carry the scars of those early days for decades. His view of authority, duty, and protection was forever shaped by that silence. and then came the coffin walk. For Harry, the trauma of walking behind his mother's casket flanked by cameras, under the eyes of the world, burned itself into memory. Each flash of a camera in the years that followed took him back to that September day in 1997, the weight of duty pressed down, crushing, suffocating. He was a child, trapped in a system that demanded composure when he needed care. As Harry grew older, he began to see the pattern more clearly. The monarchy's expectations, loyalty, visibility, silence game at the expense of well-being. The same system that had left Diana unprotected was now repeating itself. And when Meghan entered his life, the parallels became undeniable. The same intrusive press, the same relentless scrutiny, the same silence from the palace. History was repeating itself, and Harry refused to let it consume his family. Unlike Diana, who had fought but remained trapped within the institution, Harry chose to act. In 2020, he and Meghan made a decision that shook the monarchy to its core. They stepped back from royal duties. They left behind titles, obligations, and centuries of protocol not out of rebellion, but survival. Harry was determined. His wife and children would not endure what his mother had. In many ways, he was finishing the path Diana had started. She had spoken out, sought independence, and refused to be defined by royal expectations. Harry carried that spirit forward, creating a new life where he had, not the institution could, decide what safety, happiness, and family truly meant. And through it all, Charles Spencer understood. He had long been a critic of the system that failed Diana, and he knew exactly why Harry had chosen to walk away. Both men had seen the damage of a monarchy that prized image over humanity. Both acted in ways that honored Diana's memory, not by bowing to tradition, but by standing for protection, dignity, and freedom. This story is not only about grief and loss. It is about choice, courage, and the fight to protect the vulnerable. Spencer's vow at Diana's funeral and Harry's rebellion decades later are chapters of the same Lagosha legacy that demands we value human well-being over protocol, truth over silence, and love over duty. Diana's spirit lives on, not just in memory, but in the actions of those who refuse to let history repeat itself. Thank you for staying with us. Which part of this story struck you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this journey compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.